Well, it's been a while since we talked about the controversy involving Life Church, the Peter Nells, and a bunch of other rather unsavory things. So join us to get us caught up on everything is old friend Tom LoBianco, former AP writer, now writes the editor of 24 Inside News. So Tom, my friend, how's it going? Welcome back to Indiana. Sorry you had to
Hey,
come back.
you make it sound like it's a chore. No, I love being back in Indy, and thank you, Abdul. It's been always good to be back on here, man. Um, yeah, so it's yeah, a lot of developments since we last talked.
Um, so
Nathan
so
Pete,
so let's
yeah,
do this. Let's do a quick recap of how we got here, where we got started, just so the audience who may not be familiar with it or it's been a while, they're fully up to speed.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, lots happened recently. Nathan Peternell, the lead pastor of Life Church, he completed his what they refer to as a restorative process. He did, in fact, have his license suspended, and this was due in part to him having made homemade sex videos with his wife, which were discovered on the son Jonathan Peternell's cell phone when the police arrested Jonathan Peternell because he was trafficking in more than 200 videos of child sex abuse material. Ultimately, Jonathan Peternell was sentenced to 6 years in prison, 4 years served, and 2 years release. And he is now in I think it's at Newcastle now. And about a week after that happened, Nathan Peternell, the father, had his license suspended by the Assemblies of God, which is the Life Church. That's the affiliation. And ever since then, it's actually been quite chaotic in there, and a lot of people keep leaving, and this is really remarkable. Nathan Peternell's sister, who was a pastor at the church, she left. Nathan Peternell's brother-in-law, who was the interim pastor while he was going to Pentecostal rehab, he left. The church's accountant, he left. So it's not, I mean, there's a lot of families who have been leaving. Dozens upon dozens have been leaving. They had to cut their services from their Sunday services at Noblesville, where, of course, Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith is the lead pastor there. They had to cut their services from 3 services on Sundays down to 1 service on Sundays. So, a lot of people have left. And that said, and the most recent thing, you can find it over at 24 Site News, that's 24sight.news, is they're plowing ahead with their business expansion plans. They opened a medical clinic. They renamed the coffee shop so it's not as easily identifiable as the Life Church coffee shop. And they're just trying to push ahead as though nothing happened.
I see that's the odd part because um, if you had to go from 3 services to 1 service, and senior pastors are leaving, and some of the pastors, some of the people in charge have the same last name as the guy who's sort of at the center of all this controversy, you would think that maybe expansion isn't necessarily the right thing we ought to do right now.
It's really interesting. And I'll tell you, man, it's times like this, as much as I, go cover presidential campaign, write about Mike Pence nonstop and cover Donald Trump in perpetuity. I always enjoy coming back to my Metro desk roots. I used to cover county zoning meetings out in Maryland and cover stuff all over the state here when I was with the AP. And for this one, I went through City of Noblesville and was pulling the permits on their expansion plans. I'd heard about the plans to make this medical clinic. And what they did was they took they bought the house probably like, I don't know, like 2020, 2021, something like that. It's right next to the Noblesville campus, across the street from the Wawa, not too far from the Wawa over there on Sheridan Road. And they've been planning this for years. And I saw that they actually went through the process and they got the zoning exemption that they needed to make it a medical clinic. And this happened in November of last year. So they were proceeding with this when really at the beginning of this entire scandal, it's back when Jonathan Peternell, it seemed, was abandoned the Madison County Jail as he was awaiting trial on these charges. There was the beginning of the exodus from Life Church back then, and they were still plowing forward with it. And, I think, and I've written about this extensively at 24 Site News, 24sight.news. A big part of this is Ray Adler, who, if you're a long time, if you're a regular listener here with Abdul, and clearly you enjoy politics, you know the players. Ray Adler is this interesting character who has been in Hamilton County Republican politics for decades upon decades. He is part of the church. And there's kind of this rule that we have in in politics and government, which is the quieter they are, usually the more powerful they are. That's typically how it works.
Exactly. Tom LoBianco, 24 Side News, our guest on the program today, getting caught up on the whole Life Church, Peter Nell, child weird sex scandal deal. And you're right, because usually, Tom, it's the guys who are the most powerful are usually the ones who aren't talking. It's Tom Hagen in The Godfather.
Yes. 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 And it's a fascinating connection because, as I understand it, and based on my reporting and everyone I've talked to who's left the church, it's basically Micah Beckwith and his political team. For lack of a better term, you might call them like the Hamilton County Libertarians, roughly based out of Noblesville. Longtime players who have been, working against the old kind of Mitch Daniels establishment Republicans in Hamilton County for.
Well, my libertarian friends would probably take an issue with studying Micah Beckwith with anything that they have going on. So I'm just going to warn you ahead of time, my friend.
My apologies to all the good libertarians out there. Chris Spangle, hello. I hear you. I see you. I know he's not you. And Ray Adler, so, Micah Beckwith brings in Ray Adler into the church. And Adler fast tracks this stuff. And there's a reason that he's able to do that, because he used to be the lawyer for the county council in Hamilton County. He was the lawyer for Noblesville Council years and years ago. I believe he still maintains them as clients, and they do a lot of real estate work around there. So, basically they brought in Micah Beckwith through his affiliation when he was hired by Nathan Peternell 6 years ago, brought in this political operation, but he also brought in this major power broker. And, that's on the order of when I write about things, and I usually try to translate from the chatter that we hear if we're at the bar at a party convention. And it's like, okay, this is the real talk. All right, these are the people who are really running things versus, what shows up in the official documents, which can be very, very surface level and intentionally tries to avoid these things. So I try to point to who's pulling the levers on this stuff. And Ray Adler is a huge, huge figure in this thing.
Our guest on the program today is our good friend Tom LoBianco. Tom, former writer for the AP at the State House Press Corps. We've known each other for years. Right now writes for 24 Side News. He's been following and writing extensively about this whole child sex abuse scandal, pornographic images. It's very uncomfortable, ladies and gentlemen. Let's put it that way. Tom, I want to change gears a little bit, and I want to say when we ran into each other the other night and got together over dinner and just got caught up in everything, you were planning to take a trip up to Newcastle to go actually maybe do an interview. Whatever happened with that, or have you managed to do it yet?
I'll tell you, and we were talking about this. So yes, I am in the process, and this is a process. And actually, I'm going to write an essay about this over at 24 Site, because I'm very fascinated by this. As I think I mentioned, this is only the second time in my career I've had to, as a journalist, I've had to reach out to a prison to try to talk with a source. And the last time was back in 2020, and that was for a Trump World source, of which there was plenty of legal activity and criminal probes and the consequences and whatnot back then. So that was not entirely abnormal. But, what's really been striking is, I mentioned that Jonathan Peternell, who's serving his sentence now at Newcastle. And I've gone through this. I went through this process once of reaching out to him through the Madison County Jail. And I'm going through this process again now for trying to set up video visit, also sending text message, and at the new prison where he's at now. And it is astounding to me how much you have to do to reach a prisoner. The kind of checks that they do, the requirements, and frankly, also the fees. Well, I had to spend like $5 to send a text message to to a prisoner, which I I understand. You got to spend like $10 to like set up the account. I think it's what ViaPath
Yep.
is the thing the state uses, and there's a lot of basic stuff too. But I've been really surprised at like how much preliminary work you have to do. I mean, you have to identify yourself, obviously, and of course, if you're talking to people, we've all seen The Wire. And for listeners who have not seen The Wire, I would recommend if you have a weekend of nothing to do, it's incredible. I mean, we all know, that crime can still happen inside the prison and find its way outside the prison. So you have to monitor those things.
Or
But I've
just
just
go
been,
watch the movie Stir Crazy with Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor.
oh, you know what? I've never seen that one.
It's
Okay.
it's a little bit more of a humorous take on prison life, but yeah, something like things like The Wire, shows like Oz. Oz can be a little
That's dark.
rough around the edges, but it's a prison film. Let's put it that way.
Yes, that's a dark one. Yes. I was really surprised by this. And I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but yeah, it takes a lot of prep work to reach out to somebody in prison. It just really, yeah, this is very surprising to me.
Now, obviously, you got to go through all the paperwork and jump through all the hoops to get in the prison, to do the interview. Has Peter Nell responded to you yet? Because I remember you talking last time, uh, when you tried to interview the Trump person who was in during the Trump era back in 2020, when that person was in jail. I couldn't remember whether you got a hold of him or not. I want to say, have you had any luck communicating with Peter Nell, saying, "Hey, I want to talk to you, get your side of the story"? Has he responded back or anything in that nature?
Not ready to reveal details on that just yet. But
You just answered my question. Thank you.
um, I didn't say one way or another. Abdul. Just when there's updates, people will know. I'll just put it
uh,
that way. At 24site.news, 24sight.news.
no, my friend. I totally get it. Hey, it's a business, and you can't put all your business out in the street, even though some people just
Yeah.
can't stop talking, which kind of surprises me. For example, we just had the deportation rallies and all that back and forth, and well, people showing up, people
Mm,
not showing up, and then you got people like Jim Banks saying no, thank you. And then you got sort of the Nazi type references and all that as well, and then quoted like the lead Nazi jurists in their modules. I'm like, what in the world? What, my friend, what happened in Indiana here?
oh
When
no.
did we go from a world of Mitch Daniels, Mike Pence, and Eric Holcomb to whatever this is?
I read this great, and of course, when I started in Indiana back in 2011, the old source, very, very wise, told me to go run over to Borders or Barnes and Noble and pick up The Indiana Way by James Madison. And of course, being new to the state back then and not knowing an awful lot about Indiana, I love the fact that the historian's name is James Madison. And I read it I mean, for anybody who's a huge nerd on this stuff, go pick it up. I mean, it's incredible. You probably already, if you're listening, you probably already have a copy. If you're not, go get one. It's awesome. I love it. I love reading about where this culture of fiscal conservatism comes from, dating back to the early 1800s, with the canal and locks failure ultimately, and a lot of early lessons that were learned
Yeah.
by
It
state
basically boiled down
leaders.
to people trying to build a canal, build a casino on a canal, and it was a disaster. And so they said, nope, never again.
Yeah, yeah. So there's all this great history, and this is a very it's a little bit of a wind up to get to your question, Abdul, on this, because Jim Madison had a great column recently. I think it was about, oh, I don't know, like maybe a week or two ago, regarding the similarities that he sees between D.C. Stevenson, the former Klan leader from 100 years ago, and Micah Beckwith. Now, at the outset, and he notes this, and I want to note this: there's no evidence of any murder of a teacher or any of the violence that was associated with D.C. Stevenson, and for which ultimately collapsed the Klan. Thank God. Um, but there's another element there that he identifies, and he refers to it as the selling hate and grift. And you kind of see he writes about this basically selling the rage through these vehicles. And it's interesting because Madison's did a really good history of the Klan's activities in Indiana, and there's also, I think it was Timothy Egan did that one a couple years ago, and I was very fascinated to learn how much they at the outset they relied on going to churches and spreading money around through churches to build support for the Klan before, as DC Stevenson was coming up. Now, look, I don't have any evidence that Beckwith is part of the Klan. I don't have any evidence that there's a resurgence of the Klan.
Nor,
I
nor are
don't,
you making the accusation that Michael Beckwith is a Klansman at all.
right. Yeah.
Well,
So,
I think Tom, the point you're making is it's it's the technique, not necessarily the individual is what it
exactly.
is. Because a good communicator is a good communicator. Karis, I'll tell people there's not a whole lot of difference between a Barack Obama and a Donald Trump in the sense they both know how to work a crowd, how to connect with the crowd. It's just what do you use it for? Is it the light side of the force or the dark side of the force? But the force is what it is.
Yes. Yes. And,
And how's
you
that
know,
for a Star Wars reference,
I
by the
say,
way?
hey,
So
baby, love it. It's, you know, I have to say that I'm shocked. And I don't know why I'm still shocked. I mean, I was born, 1981. And, when I was coming up in school and, through undergrad and grad school. And I don't know, I just accepted that, like, oh, well, we had the Civil War, we had civil rights movement. These are the words of the founding fathers that all men and women, all humans are created equal. And that, yeah, you know what? Had some struggles in this country. We are at 250. I mean, some pretty historic struggles to get there. I always thought it was settled. And recently, and a lot of this has to do with the internet. Guys, if you're scrolling through the short videos, scream. Um, the internet sells outrage because that's what sells. And I see that a lot with Beckwith. Very often tells other people to fight. You can see this. I mean, I've listened to more Nathan Peternell and Micah Beckwith sermons than I've ever listened to any Catholic masses in my entire life, and ostensibly I'm a Catholic. Okay, so apologies to to all involved in this. Um, I've the selling the hate is the theme, and if a lot of people probably saw that photo of the white nationalist on the metro in DC. So I live out in DC, and they came into DC for the 250th birthday or 4th of July. And here's all these, I mean, quasi paramilitary people wearing masks, white mask to cover their identities. Um, Pretty menacing on purpose. And that's now a normal thing in here. I mean, it never went away really, but there's kind of a boldness. There's a resurgence of it. And, starting from Unite the Right, Charlottesville in 2017, when you had people marching through a, pretty bougie, upscale, otherwise, upscale Virginia town, chanting, Jews will not replace us. And that was the chant they were doing. I literally just bought tiki torches for my backyard, and I was like, crap, I have to get rid of my tiki torches. God damn it.
Tom LoBianco with us for a few more minutes on the program today. So Tom, going forward here and looking at just sort of the situation with the Peter folks, obviously you got some things you're working on, interviews you're doing, the whole nine yards. How have people, witnesses, been willing to talk to you throughout this entire process? How people willing to if not go on the record, at least go on background. And
Yeah,
folks, there's a difference between background and off the record. Off the record means you can't use it. On background means you can use it, but you can't identify the source.
right. Yeah. I mean, when I started this, and it's been almost a year now. I mean, basically, when Jonathan Peternell was arrested on October 23rd. I mean, we talked about this when it happened, and I tell you, I was still in shock having read that affidavit. Which is very, very. I mean, that part of the entire thing is very dark. But what I've noticed and what I've seen is that the more, and as I've talked with people, I've talked with former youth group members from Nathan Peternell's first youth group. We just talked about this neo-Nazism and the Klan and whatnot. Well, Nathan Peternell knowingly named his first youth group in the late 90s Stormfront, which was the same name as a neo-Nazi website, and he refused to change it after he was told that. And so there's a lot of parallels there. But as I've reported on this, and this is kind of how I do, and this is how we all do reporting. And if you have a fans of journalism, and you want to understand how to do this, it's really good for anything. If you want to understand stuff, Robert Caro, it's like Cairo, but Caro, Caro, had wrote a book a couple years ago called Working, and he's really a master of this. Still working on the LBJ biographies, I would note, remarkably. And thank God that guy is still alive. That you kind of work in these concentric circles as you work your way in closer to talking to the source. And and this stands. I text Nathan Peternell for every story. I text Micah Beckwith. I email. If you find me on Facebook, you can see when I put out the request for comment on
Yeah,
Facebook.
hey, anybody a member of blah blah blah? I'd love to talk to you. Here, direct DM me. I see those on occasion.
Find me. It's an open door. I want to hear from them. I think we all want to hear from them. And what's happened through this process is that, and this is kind of an old playbook. It's the Jimmy Swagger televangelist playbook. Those people out there, right? This is the messaging that Nathan Peternell puts inside of the church, is that those people out there are lying. Those are lies from the devil. Da da da. That's kind of the messaging strategy here. But what's happened increasingly is that the evidence points otherwise. A lot of people were very angry with Nathan when he told them that he had no idea what his son was being investigated for, as he kept bringing his son to church. Well, on September 10th, when they raided the Peternell home, they didn't really raid it, but they searched the Peternell home. They told Nathan Peternell and Jonathan and Christy Peternell what they were looking for and what the investigation was, that they had a tip of child sexual abuse material. And we saw this in the body camera footage, which is you can find some of that up on YouTube. And that really spurred another wave of resignations, departures from inside the church. And every time that happens, I always, sometimes it takes a little time for some folks, but I usually find more people who are willing to chat. I usually find more people who are willing to engage. And given the retribution, the promised retribution that a lot of people fear from Nathan Peternell, and the fact that this is still a quite powerful church, being connected to a statewide political office, an elected office, is no small thing. Even if it is the lieutenant governor, it's still.
But that's the part. And maybe it's just sort of the mindset, which is, what are you going to do to me? You're going to get me fired? You're going to take away my job? Or is it just or is it be excommunicated from the church? Or what? I was just kind of wondering, what is in that mindset that makes folks fear retribution in a situation like this?
It's interesting, and this is kind of there's another aspect of this, which I just remember. This, for a lot of folks, this is their community. This is their family. For a lot of folks, this is like the only thing that they do. It's not the only thing that they do, but it's a very tight-knit group. And people who have left, who after, they say they have been verbally abused by Nathan Peternell, they don't like what he was doing in the youth groups. There have been people who have left their parents and their families behind inside the church, because Nathan would work very hard to convince the parents that no, the child or the son or the daughter is lying, and none of this ever happened. So it's a very tight-knit, cohesive group. And what you lose in that, in some cases, some of these folks, they lose connections with their family. they lose their social group, right? I mean, it's no small thing having that connection over years and years and years. And there's another piece of this, and you see this in other groups where it also involves realizing that what you believed or what you thought and who you believed was a lie, was not real for many, many years. So it takes time to process all that stuff. Now, the flip side of that, and I think this is why I hear from a lot of people and why they want these stories out there, is that they're just tired of it. They want it to end. I've got 300 of Nathan Peternell's sermons downloaded. I've listened to them. He discusses having sex on Sundays in front of the entire congregation, women and children, elderly folks. That is, I would not. I mean, one of my sources, said it's grooming behavior, and yes, that actually, as I see it, meets the legal and clinical definition of grooming behavior, which starts with a normalizing process. This is what we see in other cases. I understand why sometimes it's hard for people to leave, but I more and more I hear from people who say that we just want him to stop this. Going through one of the sentiments I hear most often is that he did go through a restorative process. That's very secretive. It's supposed to be a rehab. It's not really a rehab. He comes back and doesn't apologize to anybody, doesn't say anything about, these stories that we're hearing about, and just moves on like nothing happened. And for a lot of people, not only is it unacceptable, but they just want it to stop. That's why I hear from so many people. And that's why, it takes a lot of courage. But at the same time, the only way that it happens is by bringing light to these things. So it's it's a long adventure. Okay. We're still in the middle of it. It's amazing. I think back to, when we were on the air, 9 months ago, right after this happened. And I couldn't believe my eyes. I was like, I couldn't believe what I was reading. I couldn't believe. And then you start hearing more and you see more and you get more evidence. And it's like, well, that is what's happening. So yeah, yes, a lot more coming on Life Church. And if you are there, if you're Nathan Peternell and Micah Beckwith, let's hear from you. All right. Everybody
Oh,
else.
trust me, my friend. They listen. I know for a fact that they do. Tom LoBianco with us on the program today. Tom, I was gonna stop right here, but I got to keep it for about 9 more minutes and some change, if that's okay with you, my friend.
Yeah, sure.
Do people in that congregation, do they feel betrayed?
Yeah, yeah. That's a sentiment I hear routinely. Um, One of the things that there's kind of, and I'm always thinking of this it's almost like a character profile when reporting on Nathan Peternell. Because at the beginning of this, I was very surprised at the number of people who were reaching out to me, not about Jonathan, right? This is Jonathan Peternell, the son, was the one who's facing the court cases now in prison, but about Nathan, about stories about, Nathan hitting people in the youth group, very uncomfortable physical situations that were done. A lot of talk about sex. That is the most prominent thing. As I reported, there's the 2016 17-year-old girl and her fiance go in, and they're, for marital counseling, but the marital counseling turns into, at the end of it, Nathan Peternell demanding to know how the girl is pleasured by her fiance sexually and in graphic detail. And this is I think Nathan would have been like 38 at the time, something like that, screaming at a 17-year-old and a 19-year-old, yelling at them in closed door, closed office, and demanding that they tell him about their intimate relationships, their how they have sex. And that is the stuff which has been really angered a lot of people. And that it's not taken seriously when they bring their concerns to Nathan and to Micah. And that the only way that it stops them is leaving and talking about it. The sex stuff is really, it's really interesting to me, is having been working this story now for we'll be coming up on a year in a few months. There's this as they say, a movement to quote unquote reclaim sex education for the church, which I is that is a theme out there. There are a number of folks that want to do that. They believe the church should be handling that. And
Yeah,
there's,
but I don't think they talk about a hands-on course, though,
no, I
or do it yourself.
it's really, I mean, to me, it's disturbing as a grown adult. Like I listen to this, them talking about some of the stuff, and I'm disturbed by it. And look, I've been covering, I'm a journalist for 25 years. I've seen plenty of disturbing things. And it's just, I don't feel good listening to it. And what's really fascinating to me is that I'll talk with folks who they've been in there for a while, and I'm like, well, hey, don't you think it's weird that like the pastor's talking about like the details of how he has sex with his wife, like on a Sunday? Like I don't. That's from the stage, from the days. Like I'm like, oh, never really thought about it. I was like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, it's just what he does. I was like, wow. Because to me, as outside pair of eyes, I'm like, this is like, I don't feel good listening to it. And you can imagine how it must feel for a child listening to this. Or frankly, the parents who are like, no, we don't like this. That is such a big thing, and they don't respond to it. There's a fascinating inside the assemblies of God. There's the governing structure of the assemblies of God is actually quite democratic, small d democratic. They have so Nathan and Micah in particular very often tell things to the congregation which are incorrect regarding processes of the assemblies of God, how a restorative process is determined, how they do their own internal investigation of things like this. Um, there are processes for the membership of the church as a whole to determine what they want and what they don't want. And really, as I understand it, having talked with a number of assemblies of God folks who are not part of Life Church, but just part of the, either part of leadership or other big churches elsewhere in the country, the membership can vote on whether they want the pastor to stay or to leave. And one of the things that I've heard from a number of sources was that Nathan, back in last November, December, and this was part of the whole "don't talk about this" thing. There was a series of sermons that Micah Beckwith did. They were telling people, "Don't talk about this. Stop talking about this." Well, part of the reason, as I understand it, was because you could call a meeting of the membership of the church and they could vote, and that would have probably removed him. So they forestalled that. It's very the what's going on inside there is very autocratic, and the lack of accountability from Nathan and Beckwith, and the hiding it, the not talking about it openly. Um, that's really, yeah, that has angered a lot of people and disappointed a lot of people. And but it's a theme. I've talked to people who left years before this happened, and the thing that pushed them out was that they would come to Nathan and Micah with legitimate concerns, saying like, "Hey, we feel very uncomfortable with the sex talk, and we don't like this." And they were told, "Well, no, that's God has told Nathan this, and Nathan is the one who's decided this is okay, so it's okay." And that really, it just angers a lot of people. So, yeah, I didn't quite. I'll tell you, I, as a good suburban Catholic, of done my, I've done, let's see, I'm confirmed. Okay, I went through confirmation, so mostly, mostly okay. All right, as it comes to the sacraments, I've just been shocked by all of it, but it's a theme out there. You guys, I had a really good source who told me early on in this thing to listen to The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill with Mark Driscoll. And Mark Driscoll, I'm sure if folks listening, if you're familiar with this world of things, if you have some experience with it, Mark Driscoll will probably be a familiar name. And what was interesting about it is how Driscoll started out with these great intentions, but grew autocratic the more power that he achieved. And people change over time. It's not a perfect analogy, but it's very interesting. And yeah, this thing that Driscoll preaches called the Song of Solomon, which is a sexualized version, a hypersexualized version of it's Solomon 1 through 8. Is something that Nathan Peternell preaches as well a couple of times. And, I would not play it in front of your kids. I'm not sure I'd even play it. Well, I have to play it at some point because I'm reporting on it,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't play it again. I'll just put it that way.
So, Tom, let me ask you, what has been, obviously, you've reached out to Peter Nell, but I'm more concerned right now about Beckwith and
Mhm.
the lieutenant governor and all the controversies that he's been with, saying Islam is a demonic religion. Like, dude, I think you got some of your own demons in your own church you should be exercising before you start going after, you know, people like me. Uh, but what is, uh, I guess what sort of question is, when you look at Beckwith, how does Beckwith navigate all this stuff with all this in the background? Granted, not everybody knows about it, but we're the political class, so we
Yeah,
do. And there's talk he may not be on the lieutenant governor's ticket next year, and some other things that'll be all the next cheat sheet, by the
sure.
way.
Hmm.
What is going through Beckwith? What do you think is going through Beckwith's head right now?
Well, this is interesting because Beckwith and the Beckwith family are really tied into the church. Of course, Micah is Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith is. I reported on this a few months ago. At least a few months ago, was still unlicensed. So he had his ability to preach under the Assemblies of God through Nathan Peternell. You have to have a licensed pastor in order to be able to do that. And then when Peternell had his license suspended, they moved it to his brother-in-law, and the brother-in-law can then keep the pastor. So, but that's Micah. All right, and he's of course lieutenant governor. He still continues to do this at the Noblesville campus, but also his two brothers. DJ and Daniel Beckwith are both employed by the church as pastors. And based on everything I know, their mom was a part of starting the business of the coffee shop, bringing down their ice cream for the coffee shop. So the family itself is very invested in Life Church. And, I've been talking with, because I had the same thing. I was like, my God, this thing is like a terrible scandal. Like, why would you want to be around it? If you could just pick up and leave. And I think the best I can tell, the answer seems to be financial, which is that no, they can't. They're already too entwined with the church at this point.
Wow. Okay, wow. Like I said, our guest on the program today has been a good friend, Tom LoBianco. Tom, former reporter for the AP, right now writes for 24 Inside News, has been doing yeoman's work on this whole Peter Nell Beckwith scandal related. So, Tom, not to give away the whole story, but what's coming up in the next between now and the end of the year?
Um, Well, there will be more stories between now and the end of the year for sure. Yeah, the next one on deck is regarding the person who helped advise Nathan Peternell through this scandal. And so, yes, this is my request for comment on air. Um, I mean, guys, come on, really, just make a phone call, you know. Yeah, the next one will be about the person who was advising Nathan Peternell through all this, and I'll tell you, it's not Micah. Well, I mean, Micah has been a part of it. Obviously, it's not Micah Beckwith. It's somebody else who has some problems of their own inside the Assemblies of God, and so that's the next story coming up. 24 Site News 24sight.news. And let me say this, guys, because I know that like a number of the church, like the people that work for Micah Beckwith are like really angry at me for fundraising, for being like, hey, I need donations to do this. I'm an independent journalist. I need donations to do this. I mean, that's it. People have donated like, some buy a Substack subscription for like $5 a month. That helps. If you help me out on the GoFundMe, or you send me something on Venmo, anything helps, because that's how I make my living. I do that, and I write about financial news on the side for a little bit of money, cover the Treasury Department for a little startup, and that's how I keep the lights on. So,
Hey, you can
hey
always go
guys,
to law school, get a law license, go practice law. That'll help supplement what you got going on too.
I don't need more debt, really.
That's right. Hey, Tom, if it's good enough for the federal government, it's good enough for us.
Oh no.
And we'll just leave that. Tom Obianco, my friend, always good to chat with you. We'll chat with you again in a couple months when you put out your next piece on this whole church related scandal. My friend, thank you very much for chatting with us today.
Thank you, Abdul.